Gerard Beloin owns a business that engineers roofing systems and is an author. Mr. Beloin.
I'm going to give a little economic lesson here. Back in the 1800s, corporate tax rates were 1%, and our economy dominated the world. It wasn't even close. And slowly but slowly, the corporate tax rate went up and up and up, and we became less and less competitive on the world market. Corporations don't pay taxes. If a manufacturer manufactures a widget that costs him $10 to make, he sells it to the hardware man for 15. The hardware man sells it to all of you for 20. Well, if you put a corporate tax of $5 per widget, it doesn't cost the manufacturer $10 to make it anymore. It costs him 15. He sells it to the hardware man for 20, and he sells it to you for 25. You pay the tax. In a competitive world, in this entire planet, we need to have a competitive corporate tax rate, and I'd bring it down to 1%, and this economy would take off faster than it's taking off now.
Thank you, Mr. Beloin.
I grew up in Colebrook, New Hampshire, on the Canadian border. When I was going to high school, we brought our guns to school. I remember trying out my friend's gun in the parking lot. I wasn't shooting it, but I was aiming it around, and everybody saw it. That was not a problem. And I don't think it's gun violence so much as the culture. If you see the video games they're playing today, my nephews were playing with some video games, and they were, I wouldn't have let my children play with those video games. They were shooting up people, and then it deadens the sensitivity. They actually use these video games to train soldiers on how to shoot. And I think that it's more cultural. And yes, the teachers should be allowed to carry firearms. In Parkland, the resource officer ran like a squirrel. And I think the teachers with a firearm would back everything up. It would be the second gauntlet to prevent the school shooter from achieving success.
Thank you, Mr. Beloin. A follow-up question from Mr. DeStaso.
Yes, and as a follow-up, Mr. Beloin, we'll start with you. More broadly, are there any federal restrictions that you would add to gun ownership, such as banning bump stocks? Or on the other hand, are there any federal restrictions that Congress you feel should do away with?
The silencer. The silencer is, it serves a purpose of being a quieter firearm user. I was in New Boston. I had a big backyard, and I would fire off my firearm there at target practice, and neighbors complained, we don't like the gunshots. A suppressor. And I don't know why they were ever made illegal. There's legislation now considering making the suppressor legal, and I'm all for that. Other than that, I think it's pretty good the way we got it now.
Mr. Beloin.
My sister owns an apartment building in Canaan, Vermont, and I was managing it for her while her daughter was having medical issues. And there was a tenant there named Sanjay was his first name. He's from India, and we got to chatting, and he wasn't hiding anything. He was here legally. He was on a visa, a work visa. So we started figuring out, asking him questions, as I was just curious. And they put him up, they feed him. It was like 6 months. He was doing some IT work for, I forget the company. I asked him, how much he was making an hour. And he was, it says $2 an hour. And what it is the contractors hire them out, and they pay the contractor in the amount of minimum wage. But they pay them only $2 an hour. But they feed him, clothe him, and for $2 an hour, and all he did was work and sleep. And he sends the $2 an hour home to India, where $2 an hour is worth like $30 an hour.
Thank you, Mr. Beloin. Mr. Beloin.
I have two brothers in Vietnam era veterans, and one of them lives on Hospital Road in Colebrook, short walk from the hospital. And when he needs medical care, he has to drive all the way to White River Junction and back. It's 6-7 hour round trip. And I am not disparaging the hospital in White River Junction. He says he got good care there. But if you just gave all the veterans a card that said they'd get the medical care, then they deserve it. I mean, when you put your life on the line for the country, you deserve the best medical care that the country can give you. Just give them a card, a medical card, where they can go wherever they want. and allow the Veterans Administration hospitals to compete with the other hospitals. I don't want to shut any of them down, but if they're really that good, let them compete with private hospitals. And it would. I'm sure that my brother is not the only one with that type of problem.
Mr. Beloin.
I wrote a book called Menace to Society, and in there's a chapter about my dog Kenny Boy, and we were out walking one day, and he got into a raccoon, and it was getting ugly, so I jumped in to break it up. He didn't get bit, but I did. I got bit by the raccoon. So I go, we didn't catch the raccoon, so we couldn't test it if it had rabies. So, I had to go get rabies shots. $8,000 for 4 shots. $8,000, and I'm sitting there, and the insurance company paid for it, and so it didn't cost me anything, just a $5 copay. So I sent a letter to the insurance company. I said, "Well, you guys are being hosed. I mean, you can't. It's not $8,000 for 4 rabies shots a week apart." They paid it, and they never got back to me. And there's something wrong. If you induce competition, these things, I wouldn't see maybe $500, $1,000, and somebody's making a profit there somewhere. Competition is always better. We need to push competition, encourage competition as much as we possibly can.
Mr. Beloin.
I'm pro-life. I always want to side on life versus death, the culture of life versus the culture of death. And I'm consistent. I'm also against the death penalty. I find it a bit offensive that Ann Custer finds it okay to terminate an unborn child who has done nothing wrong, nothing illegal, but then wants to allow a criminal who has killed to get a second chance. I'm all for giving the criminal who's a killer a second chance at life.
Mr. Beloin.
Mr.
Beloin.
I was in the waiting room at the Student Center, and there was a picture hanging there, a quote from St. Benedict. It said, "First in deeds, not words." And out of all the candidates up here, I'm the only one who's actually achieved the saving of taxpayer dollars in the form of billions. If you read my book, Menace to Society, I hope we can plug it a little bit. It's available on my website. You will see letters from taxpayer watchdogs across the country: California, Indiana, New Jersey, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Ohio, all giving me credit for helping them save the taxpayers billions in education funding money. Billions. I've done it.